Good evening, President Berge, Dr. Goyette, members of the board. I am happy to share the work that has been done in the Office of Instruction under the leadership of Tracy Peterson and Janet Priest, our curriculum coordinator, and answer any questions you might have about the K-5 math curriculum revisions and updates. So the Mat-Su School District follows a 6-year calendar review cycle for curriculum. In 2018, the statute that requires this was annulled and replaced by SB 104, which states that we don't have to do curriculum reviews any more frequent than every 10 years. But our school board policy still states 6 years, and when the policy review committee, they felt like it was worth looking at that was a frequent enough time. So that is the schedule that we're on. And so this year is a math review year. Board policy specifies that the school board approves the curriculum, what students learn, and that what students learn ensures a systemic ongoing program of curriculum. And we are tonight going to talk not just about curriculum, but also about materials. Materials are the tools of learning, and we are bringing there's a textbook adoption included in this action item, but there's also objectives and standard revisions that were done, and those two things together are represented in the math curriculum. So the math curriculum process. Writing teams were formed from each grade level in each school. We had 13 elementary schools represented, 12 to 15 teachers. Middle school, we had 10 teachers, 5 schools represented, high school 10 teachers, 6 schools represented. So I just say that so that you know that this work represents a lot of expertise from content area experts who are using this curriculum in the field. One of the primary changes in this curriculum revision process is that the standards have stayed the same, but we didn't have the peaks assessment when we first adopted this curriculum. And so now we have better student achievement data that shows us the level of rigor that our current curriculum is at and where students' strengths and weaknesses in learning are. And so this process is designed to address the weaknesses that we have found in our peaks results. After we pull the writing teams together and they work on revising, the curriculum goes out to stakeholders. And 6 years ago, our stakeholder review process was a little more limited than it was this year because now we have Blackboard Connect, which makes communicating with parents much easier. And we also have every student's email address. So we sent out this material to every single elementary parent. All the middle school material went to 4th to 7th grade parents, high school to 8th to 11th. We also had 2 open houses so that parents could come and look at the materials and give us feedback after they flipped through the proposed adopted material and helped us make a choice. We had principals at each level go through all these curriculum and the materials. We had all the content teachers in the district review it, and it has also been sent to our tribal partners. So the peaks material or the peaks information that we're looking at demonstrates that over the last 3 years, we would hope to have, of course, at each grade level, an uphill stair step. And instead, we kind of have some broken comb is what I like to think about it. And in 7th grade, we haven't improved much. And you can see that in our lower grades, we're having much greater success at mastering the standards than we are in our upper grades. And so what's coming before you, what came out of this process was a focus on 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and really a focus on increasing rigor, coherence, and usability so that the teachers can work with the kids and the parents in a more practical, unified way. In our peaks math, we are above the state average, so math isn't just an issue for the Mat-Su School District. The whole state is working on math. Our issue in particular, you can see in 6th grade, we're below the state average, which is unusual for us. It certainly shows that there's a hole in our game. And so that is what a lot of time was spent on, and we've had a national math consultant come up and work with us. In fact, she got to experience her first Alaska blizzard. She was here yesterday working with 105 fourth and fifth grade math teachers who volunteered to come in and spend the day with us. Again, long game, building those skills so that we have better success in sixth grade. When we look at our subgroups in math, that's the shape that we would like as for our progress, is that we're gaining little by little in many of our groups, but again, we have a lot of room to grow. We have had a lot of growth with English learners and students with disabilities, and even though those are our lowest performing subgroups, we've had the most amount of gains in those areas. And what's changed with students with disabilities is we've got a systemic, multi-tiered system of support that prescribes a Tier 3 math program in secondary schools that we've been having a lot of success with. And that is called TransMath, and that program is not up for review. It is just a very small number of kids. So this is perhaps the information that you would be most interested in, is what did the parents say and how did we gather that information. So of all those thousands of surveys, we had some parents spend a lot of time, and we were very grateful for their clicking on the links and filling out the surveys. And overwhelming, they supported the changes that were described and shown to them, and we are bringing forward the math materials that was overwhelmingly supported by parents and teachers. If a parent said that they disagreed with the adoption or the revisions, then the survey asked them why. And so we pulled together the most common themes. In the elementary school, 80% said they approved of the revision. Of the 20% that didn't approve, their most common concern was teaching Common Core standards. Of the middle school parents, their most common concern was some of them felt like the teachers didn't have the skills to really explain the math to their children. They wanted the teachers to teach math and not rely on online materials, and they wanted students to have a book. And so those are all considerations that, as you look at the materials that are coming before you today, we certainly have a plan for increasing teacher skill. There are online materials, but in no way does it substitute for quality instruction from the teacher, and every student will have a book. We had quite a bit of parents in the high school area look at our curriculum, and we were pleased with that. That's an increase than we've seen before. Most common concerns for these parents were that they wanted students to be ready for college math, and there were some parents who talked about the concern of students having to take remedial math when they get to college, and we have been aware of that concern for some time, and that really is a very small number of students now, but we appreciated that parents are having those expectations and voicing that. We also had a pretty common theme that students need a book to take home so parents can help. And I think sometimes in our age of budget shortages, we have books that live in the classroom, and then kids just take copies or they work online at home. And parents really want to see a math book coming home. And then lastly, they wanted teachers teaching similar to the middle school parents rather than video or online presentations. And flipped classrooms is a common instructional technique that teachers have been employing. We have students go home. Sometimes the teachers teach at school and videotape themselves. Then the student watches the lesson at home and then comes to school and does the work. And that is a really big shift. And so some parents didn't appreciate that. And so we certainly have options and we'll be sharing that concern with our teachers as we work with this new material. So in K-5 mathematics, I'll stop right there. That's the overview. And I'm going to pause, take off my reader so I can see your faces to see if there's some furrowed eyebrows there. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Yes, Mr. Larson.
Thank you. with this new curriculum, do you feel that, is it going to be any different than the old? Do we have to go back through professional development and teaching everything all over again, and then have another 6 months or 8 months of trial and error, this kind of thing, or can people get right into it and teach this?
That's a great question. So when I talk about the middle school materials, I'll go more in depth.
Okay.
But I believe there is a lot more professional development in the direction we're going than the previous. So no, I don't think it's an off-the-shelf, open the book, chapter 4, odd kind of a math lesson. It's more involved than that. And I'll talk a little bit about why.
Yes, Mr. Ponder.
Just a statement on the survey. I see that the most common concern, and in fact the only concern expressed by elementary parents, is teaching Common Core standards. I can't help if that's the top and only priority and concern by parents, because the kids come home and they get this math put in front of them that's more kind of more a different language than it is math, and trying to interpret it. And I'm just looking at this, following it. In the middle school, parents say most common concern is teachers need more skills in teaching math, or they want teachers to teach math, not rely on online materials. I wonder if that shift from the kids coming home and getting the parents' help is now, well, you should be getting your teacher to help you with that. And the kids saying, well, the teachers, put me in front of the online, which maybe the teachers don't get some of the Common Core questions that are coming out. I don't know, but you can't help but just notice that flow on how that works. So anyway, I don't know. Was that the only concern from elementary parents who responded?
I'm going to just ask my colleagues here, my phone friend here. Were there any other concerns that came forward? That was. One thing I want to say is that out of 20 parents, if 80% approved, then we're really talking that 20% of 20, which is 2, right? 4. Obviously, I need to work on my math too.
I got you. I can't do math on the spot either, but it's
so it wasn't a large group, but
sure.
But it was what we asked, and we definitely wanted to represent what was said, so that people feel like if they bother to take the time, that we're going to hear it. And
yeah. And I think that's just interesting that most people I speak to and say, hey, what do you see in the schools, or my kids graduated, they're not in schools, I don't keep up with that. But the one thing I've heard, teach them math. And these are people who don't have kids anymore in the school are saying that addressing Common Core. So.
I'd like to address the Common Core. I think it's something that in education in the state of Alaska, we did not do a very good job being transparent on. When they were rolled out, they were really, everyone was told that they're Alaska standards. But the reality is if you pulled up Common Core and Alaska standards and put them right next to each other, it's clear that the Common Core was the starting point, and then they would add things like with scaffolded support or other just minor phrases. We are more aligned with Common Core than some states that say they're Common Core. So I think it's really important that we're clear with our parents on that because we have to follow Alaska standards, we cannot identify material that isn't then aligned with Common Core, and oftentimes may even say Common Core in the materials. Yeah.
so for K-5, again, these are updates and revisions. There's not new standards. So they were the same standards as before. There's just a new assessment. So what we did was we looked at the performance at each grade level compared to what was in the curriculum framework and how were we performing on peaks and MAP. And then we worked with our national consultant and teams of teachers to fill those gaps. And one of the things that we came to understand was that there was a lack of focus and coherence Math standards are there's many micro standards in math standards, and teachers get spread a mile wide, they say, and an inch deep. And so now our math standards have been aligned to what is expected to be mastered, and which are the standards that build on the next grade level. So they're for sure most important for being successful at the next grade level. And so each grade level has this summary sheet now that should help teachers know where to spend their time and energy, and what is the most important skill to build for the next grade level. This is an example from third grade about operations and algebraic thinking. And if you know the Common Core, we're doing algebraic thinking in third grade. There's more examples. There's the objectives are clear, but it also is coded with that green bar that says this is a really important standard. The green is the focus standards, and that if your kids don't master these, you shouldn't be spending time on the other standards. Questions about elementary? In the board, I could speak to materials for elementary. In the board, and it speaks to Member Larson's question, we did not adopt or move forward with new math materials for the K-5 grades. They're going to stick with Go Math for one more year, but Houghton Mifflin, the publishing company, is not updating Go Math. It's not doing any of the work there, so we would have to buy new curriculum afterwards. So we're going to put off that for a year so that we can focus on doing a really good job with the new math materials for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and then the next year do a K-5 math materials adoption. So you will see math materials next year again. So 6-8, very similar. There were standard summary pages created for each grade level and prioritized standards based on Peaks result and work with our national math consultant. The big difference for 6-8 was that there was a math material selection process, and we worked with through a website called edreports.org, which is an independent nonprofit designed to improve education by providing reviews of K-12 instructional materials. And what these reviews do is they'll tell you exactly which materials are aligned best to the standards and which provide the most amount of focus and coherence, so fewer standards with deeper understanding. What's different about the math materials that we're bringing forward is that there was a lack of conceptual understanding in our results. So we had 6th grade is a grade level where concepts are assessed, not rote processes. We do know that procedural skills and fluency, or speed and accuracy in calculations, is still very important. Those are still part of our math curriculum, but we also want students to be able to have the ability to apply math to real-world problems. And that's part of the usability that was another gateway. So if the materials had focus and coherence, if the rigor was high enough that we would expect kids to be proficient, then was it usable? And was it not just usable for the real world, but was it usable by parents? Was it usable by teachers? And could everybody who was going to be involved with this understand it? One of the things we like best about Ready Math is that there is a parent letter that tells what every objective is about. It's already designed in parent-friendly language, and it has parent resources available for it. So Ready Math is the program that we're bringing forward to, it's the tools for learning to address the curriculum of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And it is a new curriculum, and it has strengths in areas that we think our Go Math curriculum did not. So lessons are designed around discussion, math discussion and application. And we found, and our math consultant has really helped us see that if kids can't talk about why they're doing what they're doing, that their conceptual understanding is limited. I give the example of a lot of us know how to divide by fractions. You invert and multiply. But if you asked a student, why do you invert and multiply when you divide by fractions? They say, so that you can get it right. the concept of that is lost. And then if you ask a teacher, why do you teach kids to invert and multiply when you divide by fractions? It's really hard for them to tell you the concept of that as well. So this math curriculum really gives kids opportunities to talk to each other about what is the concept, what's really happening, describing why they have the answer. And it's got discussion cards that go with it that we believe that when the teacher gets good at having kids talk about concepts, that will apply to other content areas as well. The discussion cards are not necessarily just math discussion. They're just how to get kids thinking about their thinking and talking about their thinking. There's a lot of rigor and practice. A lot of us are familiar with Saxon. Saxon was known for spiraling curriculum, spiraling concepts, and having them come up repeatedly. What we like about this is that new concepts are introduced, but there's practice on old concepts, and there's enough practice that a student could go home with just a homework set of the work that they were introduced that day. They don't have to have a wide variety of we've had math curriculums where the problems were so broad that they would work on one thing and it would be overwhelming. This is a subscription model, so they're going to be working on the online platform and updating it all the time. So 6 years from now, the world will be different. And lucky for us, first time ever, so will our math curriculum. It'll be more aligned to real world issues through this personalization platform. What we like about the personalization platform is that every student takes a diagnostic, and then the platform provides work to fill holes. A lot of times students are good at math, but they, for whatever reason, had strep throat when something was taught. And again, those micro standards, they missed that. And all kinds of skills just don't make sense for them because they have a hole from early on. So this curriculum has a diagnostic tool for filling holes. It supports blended learning, but it also has traditional learning. It does have extensive professional development because we want teachers to be able to talk about concepts as well as the how to do the math. And the professional development is going to be linked to our achievement data. So it's not just what they think we need to know to use their materials. It's going to be what are our areas where students aren't performing as well? How could we be better at teaching that? And if you've ever been a teacher, you know that you need room in your workbook to show your work. And it's so funny that that's what teachers loved, but that was a big deal for teachers. We don't have to have extra things. Questions about middle school math materials?
Yes, Mr. Larson.
This is a whole new program, 6th, 7th, and 8th. The last time we did that, the problem was like 6th and 7th graders are in the old program. How are they going to blend into this? Are they going to have to catch up, or are they going to end up?
The last change, the primary challenge was the standards changed so much. And so really many standards from upper grade levels were pushed down into lower grade levels. So teachers were very concerned, especially at the elementary level, as we adopted the new materials, that literally there were gaps that weren't taught. So these are the same standards. It is a different program, though, different materials. So there isn't as much concern with that gap.
I remember that. I was at a high school when that happened, and Algebra 1, half the standards from Algebra 1 were pushed down to 8th grade, but the kids who left 8th grade didn't get them, and then Algebra 1 started further along, and so they had a gap in learning, and I remember that was a large concern. The standards haven't changed, and so students have been exposed to the same standards. They're just going to have a different tool for learning to get at those standards.
Dr. Weldon.
I just review here, we are still trying to have our 8th graders do algebra so that they can go on and do higher math in high school. How is that working?
I think it's fair to say that we probably have at least 25% of our students that are doing Algebra 1. by 8th grade. And your chances of graduating from high school and moving on to college and successfully completing college, completing algebra by the end of 8th grade is one of those indicators of success. It's one of the hallmarks of ANSEP, the Alaska Native Science and Engineering Project. Students are able to build a computer, and if they successfully pass Algebra 1 by the end of 8th grade, then they're able to keep that. So not only have we increased our overall enrollment, but we've really greatly increased our subgroup enrollment in Algebra 1 by 8.
So a follow-up question then is this curriculum here, 6 through 8, when are you introducing the algebra? Is that 7th grade or 8th grade?
Algebra is still a 9th grade course that students take for credit. And so if a student's ready for Algebra 1 in 7th grade, we have almost all of our middle schools have one class of Algebra 1 in 7th grade, and then they all have multiple classes of Algebra 1 in 8th grade, but then they have a large group of students in 8th grade math. So usually in 8th grade, there's 3 different math courses. There's also usually in 8th grade 1 class of geometry from the kids who took Algebra 1 in 7th grade.
Mr. Taylor.
On one of your slides, you had an arrow going up there, and at the end of it, it said usability. There you go. Is that part of this course? I mean, do they get to have opportunities to use what they learn? And the reason I asked that is I didn't appreciate geometry till I built my first house, so anyway, that's my question.
That's a great question. So there are a lot of real-world applications to this curriculum, but I would say that the hands-on usability is going to come in high school. And again, that speaks to the relevance of career and technical education. And we're really looking at infusing mathematics, geometry is a great example, into construction trades and having dual credit courses where kids do geometry work and build something in the same course. So, and in fact, we've talked a lot about that in the Houston, thinking about the curriculum for Houston as they're trying to fit a lot of courses into one master schedule. Wrapping it up. So in high school, while there was a lot of feedback and there was a lot of teachers involved, there were not very many changes. So predominantly, the teachers analyzed pacing, the order of the chapters. They added notes to the teachers, additional links, and they also added explanations under the chapter headings of why the changes were made. So if you see this example, it says this chapter has been moved due to the high level of content on the PEAKS test. So again, in 9th grade, or when we first adopted this, there wasn't the PEAKS test. Now we know that 8 to 10% of the PEAKS test is data analysis and probability, which has a huge real-world impact. And so now that's been moved forward. Sometimes you didn't get to chapter 10 before they took the test. So those were the sort of revisions that were made. The fiscal
Mr. Trimmer. Oh, Member Larson.
Just the fiscal note. The fiscal note for math, there's the Go Math. That's going to be one more year. Already math materials are very similar in price to what we've been paying for Go Math. So it's because of scale that the dollar amount is so much. The per student amount is very reasonable. And then in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 in geometry, we are not purchasing new textbooks. Our textbooks are in good shape, and that content hasn't changed much in the last 6 years. But our digital textbook license has expired. And so we're buying 600 more e-licenses, and then students are going to reuse the textbook. And that's, now I'm done.
Yes, Mr. Hart.
Just looking back at the test scores when we first started out, taking a look at peaks, I know it's across the board too, the ACTs, SATs, et cetera. We're seeing similar trends. This is a statewide issue. Does that trace back to the state standards?
The state standards for upper grades are the cut scores are very rigorous. And so in the correlation studies with MAP, in the lower grades, you need to be in anywhere from around 50% to 60% to be proficient on the peaks. But in the upper grades, you need to be in the 70s and even up to 80 for 8th grade. They haven't done a correlation in 9th grade. So I think that one of the intentions of the peaks cut scores was to raise the rigor and increase performance, but it's resulted in a lot of kids having non-proficient scores, even though they're very good students in math and above average by another nationally normed test.
But what's the percentage of people going into college? I mean, you may not have these statistics. Forgive me if I'm asking something that you don't have the answer to. But what's the percentage of the kids going into college that have to take remedial math?
We did not have that exact number, no.
So we will get that for you in the next Board Connect. 2 years ago, we did have that for the University of Alaska system for both ELA and mathematics. I believe it was 9%, but we will verify that and get that in the Board Connect.
Okay, and then the as far as the curriculum here, is any of it Common Core?
It's all aligned with Common Core because the Alaska state standards are aligned with the Common Core.
What's the reason? What would happen if we went away from Alaska state standards on that issue?
So it's statute that we follow the Alaska state standards. We're obligated to do that. So we could, I mean, under a worst case scenario, we could have a fiscal consequence from the Department of Education if we weren't following the standards. A program that we used to use that many schools really liked was Saxon Math. It's a traditional math program. They did not update to the new standards. And so, so the programs that we vetted, that we looked at, that we presented through the curriculum review process for parents were all aligned with Alaska state standards, which are aligned with Common Core standards.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but did the state make it illegal to use state funding to purchase Common Core material? Does anybody remember? Or is that, okay,
We had that question before, and we had a letter from the commissioner last year that
but does statute say anything on that issue? Not the commissioner's opinion, the statute.
I know that like charter schools can't even get renewed unless they demonstrate they're teaching the state standards. And so all of school existence is dependent on teaching the standards that are adopted by the state of Alaska, which is the Common Core to about 95% alignment.
Yeah, but I thought they,
No, I know exactly what you're referencing. And we can, this is non-action item, so that we'll follow up on all these for the next. What I recall was that DEED wasn't allowed to use their, even though all money passes through DEED, that district curriculum was not, it was DEED materials, which is a contradictory, right? We got to use Common Core aligned, so.
right, okay, thank you.
Dr. Welton?
And just a comment, we found that because of where the textbooks are made, as mostly California and Texas, you cannot buy an Alaska textbook because there just isn't a publishing company here to do that. And all of the Texas ones will say they're aligned to Common Core. All of the California ones will say that. We know as Alaskans that there is a difference. It may not be much, but there is a difference, and it's there, and we teach to that standard even though the book says Common Core.
Member Larson?
2 years ago, we talked about kids going through Algebra 1, 2, geometry, so forth, early on in their high school career, and then having a year or two gap, their junior, senior year, and then when they hit college, they forget what they learned 2 years ago. And we talked about one time some sort of remedial math class to keep them up on what they learned, so they don't end up in school or on the SATs doing poorly because they've gotten them all out of the way, especially if they're doing Algebra 1 and middle school. Is there any movement towards making sure kids, remain or maintain that knowledge?
One of the things we added to the high school program of studies was intermediate algebra. So if a student had kind of a sketchy experience in Algebra 1 and they weren't going straight to Algebra 2, we didn't want them to not take a math class, and we wanted them to progress. So now all of our high schools offer intermediate algebra as a way to keep kids engaged in earning math credits. Our students who take math early, there is a sequence of courses that they can take math every single year. So you can take Algebra 1 in 7th, Geometry in 8th, Algebra 2 in 9th, and then pre-calculus, and then AP Calc AB and Calc BC. So they'll have actually 6 years of math if they start early. So we do have a course sequence that moves kids along if they're motivated. If they're not, we have algebra for finance, and then we're working on the CTE math courses that are integrated.
I'm going to expand a little bit more on your work really in implementing the ACT for all juniors last year. She worked with the University of Alaska so that the junior year students can know whether or not they're ready right for college math. And if not, they can enroll in our APEX courses. And we now have SAT and ACT prep APEX courses so students can get up to speed in passing that so that they do not have to do remedial math when they enter college. We offered it to all students, and we were willing to pay for it. It was not administered during the school day. It was administered on a Saturday. Do you know what percentage of our juniors last year took the ACT?
I think it was administered during the day,
okay.
And we had over 85%.
85%,
taken.
excellent.
Is there a reason we could not make it mandatory?
Well, in this state, it's hard to mandate any
Sure.
standardized assessments, so anyone could opt out of any assessment in this state. HB 156,
Okay.
allows that.
So there's a statute that would
Yeah.
prevent us from
Yeah.
making it mandatory for graduation.
Parents have the
something.
right to opt out of any assessment or curriculum in our state.
Gotcha. That was in
Yeah.
2016. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The problem though was when they went to college, they ended up in a remedial.
One of the ways we
math
address
class.
that is that we have subscriptions to ALEX, and the University of Alaska Anchorage uses ALEX as a gateway assessment to determine which math program or math course that students are ready for. The middle college and ANSEP also use the same, and so we have study programs and we have subscriptions, and kids can take that ALEX assessment, know if they're ready for college level math, and then target those. That program also targets their weaknesses, or we can put them in a course. So there's no reason for a student to get a surprise when they get out of high school and find out they're not ready for college math. We've sewed up that hole pretty well.
Yes, Mr. Ponder.
In reference to the deed opinion, was that something that does deed? Are they in the practice of purchasing curriculum?
Not to my knowledge, but I can get the letter I can include it in the Board Connect on Tuesday.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand the connection between if they say something doesn't apply to them and that's what it was meant for. And I don't know what the letter is, so I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out, connect the dots. That's all. If Common Core is a curriculum and deed is saying that Common Core can't be purchased only by deed, they don't purchase curriculum, so I don't know. That's just interesting. And I think it does go back to board policy. I love that you open with board policy 6141. The board accepts responsibility for establishing what the students should learn. And so I would say that we want to go rogue, then by golly, it can be pointed at the board for that. So that's all.
Yeah, it's if the statute says that the state money should not be spent on Common Core, and then deed saying, well, that means that we can't do it. It sounds like money laundering. I mean, it's the intent should be fairly clear. And if there is something that you guys think is a better tool to get them better prepared for college that does not involve state standards, please let us know. Please get away from whatever. If we have to go to the legislature, if we have to go to court, if we need to, this board will. So please, we need to do it for the kids.
Any further board comments? Thank you, Ms. Pargo.